My name is Evelyn Rosewood, and I've been painting portraits professionally for 8 years. At 29, I built a modest but respected career creating commissioned artwork for families, couples, and individuals who want something more personal than a photograph. My studio apartment in Brooklyn is cramped but filled with natural light, canvases in various stages of completion, and the perpetual smell of oil paints and turpentine that has become as familiar as my own perfume. I specialize in what I call emotional realism, portraits that capture not just someone's physical appearance, but the essence of who they are. My clients often tell me that I've somehow managed to paint their soul, to show them something about themselves they'd never noticed before. It's what I love most about my work, that moment of recognition when someone sees themselves truly reflected in brushstrokes and color. The commission that would change everything came through my website on a rainy Tuesday in April. The client's name was Madison Torres, and she wanted a graduation portrait painted as a surprise gift for her daughter, Scarlett Nakamura. The request seemed straightforward enough: capture a young woman on the cusp of graduating from Columbia University with a degree in international relations, someone preparing to step into the world with confidence and purpose. She's been working so hard for this moment, Madison wrote in her initial email. I want something that shows how proud I am of everything she's accomplished. Money is no object, I want this to be perfect. The phrase, money is no object, always makes me slightly uncomfortable. In my experience, clients who lead with that statement often have the highest expectations and the shortest patience for the artistic process. But I needed the work. Spring had been slow, and my rent was due in 2 weeks. Madison attached several photos of Scarlett, and I understood immediately why she wanted a painted portrait rather than a professional photograph. Scarlett was stunning in that effortless way that some young women possess, mixed Asian and Latina heritage that had given her striking features, long dark hair that caught light like silk, and eyes that seemed to hold both intelligence and kindness. But more than her physical beauty, there was something about her expression that drew me in. She had the look of someone who was genuinely happy, genuinely at peace with herself and her place in the world. The photos showed her in various settings: studying in the library, laughing with friends at what looked like a rooftop party, volunteering at what appeared to be a community center. In every image, she was engaged, present, alive. I found myself studying her face for hours, trying to understand what made her so magnetic, so instantly likable. I quoted Madison $3,500 for a 24 by 30-inch oil portrait, with a timeline of 6 weeks for completion. She agreed immediately and sent a deposit that same day, along with more detailed information about Scarlett's accomplishments. Summa cum laude graduation, internship at the United Nations, fluent in 4 languages, volunteer work with refugee resettlement programs. This wasn't just a privileged college student coasting through an expensive education, this was someone who had genuinely worked to make the world better. I began working on Scarlett's portrait the following Monday, starting with detailed sketches to capture the structure of her face, the way light fell across her features, the subtle asymmetries that made her beautiful rather than merely pretty. I decided to paint her in her graduation cap and gown, but with a twist. Instead of the traditional formal pose, I wanted to show her in a moment of genuine joy, perhaps laughing or smiling at something just outside the frame. The painting consumed me in the way that only the best projects do. I found myself working 12-hour days, losing track of time as I layered paint and adjusted shadows, trying to capture not just how Scarlett looked, but who she seemed to be. I painted the intelligence in her eyes, the warmth in her smile, the quiet confidence in the way she held her shoulders. I added subtle details that weren't in any of the reference photos: a small crease at the corner of her eyes that suggested someone who laughed often, a slight tilt to her head that conveyed curiosity about the world around her. As the weeks passed, I found myself thinking about Scarlett even when I wasn't painting. I wondered what it would be like to be her age again, to have that sense of unlimited possibility stretching out ahead. I thought about her volunteer work, her academic achievements, the way she seemed to move through the world with such purpose and grace. In some ways, painting her felt like painting the person I wished I had been at 22, confident, accomplished, certain of my path forward. I also found myself thinking about Madison, who called every few days for updates. She was clearly a devoted mother, someone who had invested deeply in her daughter's success and wanted to commemorate this milestone in the most meaningful way possible. During our conversations, she would share stories about Scarlett's childhood, her academic struggles and triumphs, her plans for graduate school and eventually a career in international diplomacy. She's always been special, Madison told me during one of our check-ins. Even as a little girl, she was the one organizing fundraisers for animal shelters and writing letters to politicians about issues she cared about. This graduation isn't just about finishing school, it's about becoming the person she was always meant to be. By the 4th week, the portrait was nearly complete. I had captured something in Scarlett's expression that felt almost magical, a combination of wisdom and innocence, strength and vulnerability, that seemed to glow from within the canvas. It was some of my best work, the kind of painting that reminded me why I had become an artist in the first place. I was adding the final details to her graduation cap when Madison called with an update that made my stomach drop. "I have some wonderful news," she said, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Scarlett just got accepted to a PhD program at Oxford. She's going to be studying international humanitarian law. I'm so proud I could burst." "That's amazing," I said, though something in her tone made me uneasy. "The thing is, she's leaving for England earlier than we expected. The program starts in July, and she wants to get settled and do some traveling first. So I was wondering if we could move up the delivery date? I'd love to give this to her at her graduation party next weekend." I looked at the nearly finished portrait, then at my calendar. Moving up the deadline meant working around the clock for the next 5 days, but it was doable. "Of course," I said. "I want her to have it for such an important celebration." What I didn't anticipate was how those extra days of intensive work would deepen my connection to the painting, and by extension, to Scarlett herself. The graduation party was held at Madison's home in Westchester, a sprawling colonial that spoke of old money and good taste. I arrived early to deliver the portrait, nervous in the way I always am when presenting a major commission. No matter how confident I feel about a piece in my studio, there's always that moment of terror when the client sees it for the first time, when months of work are reduced to a single reaction. Madison gasped when I unwrapped the painting, her hand flying to her mouth in genuine surprise and delight. "Oh my God, Evelyn. This is incredible. You've captured her perfectly. She looks so alive, so vibrant. It's like she's about to step right out of the frame." Relief flooded through me, followed by the familiar satisfaction of a job well done. Madison insisted on hanging the portrait in the living room immediately, positioning it where it would be the first thing guests saw when they entered. She paid my final invoice without even looking at it, adding a generous tip that made my eyes water. "I can't wait for Scarlett to see this," she said, adjusting the frame slightly. "She's going to be so moved. This is exactly the kind of meaningful gift she'll treasure forever." The party began an hour later, and I found myself lingering longer than I should have, curious to see Scarlett's reaction to the portrait in person. I positioned myself near the appetizer table with a good view of the living room, nursing a glass of wine and trying to look like I belonged among the doctors, lawyers, and academics who made up the Torres family's social circle. When Scarlett arrived, I understood immediately why I had been so drawn to painting her. In person, she was even more magnetic than in the photographs, radiant with happiness, gracious with every guest, genuinely interested in everyone she spoke with. She moved through the room like someone who had never met a stranger, equally comfortable chatting with her grandmother's bridge partners and her college friends. The moment she saw the portrait, her face lit up with an expression of pure wonder. She stood transfixed for several minutes, taking in every detail, occasionally reaching out as if to touch the canvas before catching herself. I watched as she called her mother over, saw them embrace as tears streamed down both their faces. "I can't believe you did this," I heard Scarlett say. "It's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me. I feel so seen, so honored. Who painted this? I need to thank them properly." Madison looked around the room, clearly searching for me, but I had already slipped away. Something about the moment felt too private, too intimate for me to intrude upon. I drove home feeling more satisfied with my work than I had in months, already imagining how I would describe this commission to other potential clients. It was perfect. Until it wasn't. 3 days after the party, I was scrolling through Instagram during my morning coffee when I saw it. Scarlett had posted a photo of herself standing next to my portrait, beaming with pride and joy. The image had already garnered hundreds of likes and dozens of comments congratulating her on her graduation and upcoming move to Oxford. But it was the caption that made my blood run cold, overwhelmed by this gorgeous graduation gift from my mom. "So grateful some fan took the time to create this beautiful artwork. Feeling so blessed and loved. #graduation #blessed #Oxford 2024 #grateful, some fan." I stared at my phone screen, reading the caption over and over, certain I was misunderstanding something. But there was no ambiguity in her words. She had dismissed 6 weeks of my professional work, my artistic vision, my careful attention to every detail of her face and expression, as something created by some fan. The comments section made it worse. Friend after friend gushed about how sweet it was that a random fan had been so moved by Scarlett's story that they had painted her portrait. Several people speculated about who this mysterious admirer might be, with suggestions ranging from a secret crush to an older woman inspired by Scarlett's volunteer work. "So cool that you inspire people like this," wrote one commenter. "You must have really touched someone's life for them to put this much effort into a painting," added another. "This is what happens when you're as amazing as you are, people can't help but want to celebrate you," chimed in a third. Each comment felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I wasn't a fan. I wasn't inspired by Scarlett's story in some abstract, parasocial way. I was a professional artist who had been commissioned by her mother to create a meaningful graduation gift. I had spent weeks studying her face, understanding her expressions, trying to capture her essence in paint and canvas. I had poured my technical skill and artistic vision into creating something that would honor this milestone in her life. And she had reduced me to an anonymous admirer, someone so insignificant that I didn't even deserve to be named. I tried to rationalize her response. Maybe Madison hadn't told her who painted the portrait. Maybe she genuinely didn't know that. This was a commissioned piece rather than a spontaneous gesture from a stranger. But even as I made these excuses, I knew they didn't hold water. Madison had been effusive in her praise at the party, had talked about wanting Scarlett to thank the artist properly. There was no way Scarlett didn't know this was professional work. The truth was simpler and more painful. She had chosen to present the portrait as the work of an anonymous fan because it made for a better story. It was more romantic, more Instagram-worthy, to be celebrated by a mysterious admirer than to simply acknowledge that her mother had hired an artist to paint her graduation portrait. I was a plot device in her personal narrative, not a person worthy of recognition or credit. For the first day after seeing the Instagram post, I was simply hurt. I moped around my studio, unable to focus on other projects, replaying the moment at the party when Scarlett had seemed so genuinely moved by the portrait. Had that emotion been real, or had she been performing even then, already calculating how to present this gift in the most flattering light possible? By the second day, hurt had transformed into anger. I began drafting messages to Scarlett, explaining who I was, and asking her to correct the record. But each attempt felt either too aggressive or too pathetic, and I deleted them all without sending. What was I supposed to say? "Actually, I'm not a fan, I'm a professional artist your mother paid to paint you?" It sounded petty and self-serving. Even though it was simply the truth. I considered reaching out to Madison, but that felt like tattling to someone's mother, which was somehow even worse. Besides, if Madison had wanted Scarlett to know I was a professional artist, she would have made that clear from the beginning. On the third day, I made a decision that surprised even me. I was going to tell my story publicly. I had been building a modest following on social media over the past few years, sharing time-lapse videos of my painting process and finished portraits with the stories behind them. My followers were mostly other artists, art enthusiasts, and past clients who enjoyed seeing my work. It wasn't a huge platform, maybe 3,000 followers across Instagram and TikTok, but it was my space to share my artistic journey authentically. I created a post that included a photo of myself in my studio with Scarlett's portrait, along with a carefully worded caption that told the truth without attacking anyone directly. Sometimes the stories behind our artwork take unexpected turns. 6 weeks ago, I was commissioned by a devoted mother to create a graduation portrait of her daughter. I spent weeks studying reference photos, understanding the subject's expressions and personality, working to capture not just a likeness but the essence of a young woman embarking on an exciting new chapter of her life. The portrait was a labor of love and professional pride, one of my favorite pieces of the year. But when the subject shared the artwork on social media, she described it as created by some fan, erasing both my identity as the artist and the fact that this was a commissioned work. As artists, we often struggle with being seen and valued for our professional contributions. This experience reminded me why it's so important to advocate for proper attribution and to remember that behind every piece of art is a real person who deserves recognition for their skill, time, and creative vision. Art is not created by anonymous admirers in the ether, it's made by working artists who deserve to be acknowledged for their craft. I hesitated for a long time before hitting post, knowing that once I shared this story, there would be no taking it back. But ultimately, I felt like I owed it to myself and to other artists who had experienced similar erasure to speak up. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, my post had been shared hundreds of times across multiple platforms. Fellow artists began commenting with their own stories of being dismissed, uncredited, or treated as if their work materialized from thin air. The hashtag artists deserve credit began trending in art circles, with creators sharing examples of their work being posted without attribution or acknowledgement. But the response wasn't limited to the art community. The story seemed to resonate with anyone who had ever been made invisible in their professional life, anyone who had watched someone else take credit for their work or diminish their contributions. Teachers, writers, designers, photographers, musicians, creative professionals from every field began sharing similar experiences of being treated as if their expertise and labor didn't matter. The attention also meant that people began finding and sharing Scarlett's original Instagram post, which had now accumulated thousands of comments pointing out that the fan was actually a professional artist commissioned by her mother. The tone of these comments ranged from gently educational to harshly critical, with many people expressing disappointment that someone who presented herself as socially conscious and grateful would so casually erase another woman's professional work. Scarlett's initial response was to delete the post entirely, but screenshots had already been circulated widely. Within 24 hours, she posted a new message that read, "I want to apologize for my previous post about my graduation portrait. I now understand that the artwork was created by a professional artist, and I should have given proper credit from the beginning. I'm sorry for any confusion." It was a non-apology that somehow made things worse. "I now understand," suggested that she hadn't known the truth initially, which contradicted everything Madison had told me about wanting Scarlett to thank me properly. "I should have given proper credit," implied that this was simply an oversight. Rather than a deliberate choice to present a more appealing narrative, the response to her apology was swift and unforgiving. People called out the passive language, the refusal to take real responsibility, the way she continued to avoid naming me or acknowledging the specific harm her words had caused. Art advocates and women's rights supporters pointed out that her dismissal of my work perpetuated exactly the kind of invisibility that women artists have been fighting against for centuries. More damaging for Scarlett personally were the people who began questioning her character and values. Here was someone about to embark on a career in international humanitarian law, someone who presented herself as an advocate for justice and equality, casually erasing another woman's professional contributions for social media clout. The cognitive dissonance was too glaring to ignore. Madison reached out to me during the height of the controversy, apologetic and mortified. "I don't understand what happened," she said during our phone call. "I told Scarlett multiple times that you were a professional artist I had commissioned. She met you briefly at the party. I don't know why she posted what she did." "Maybe," I said carefully, "she thought it sounded better to have a mysterious fan than to admit her mother hired someone to paint her." The silence on the other end of the line told me everything I needed to know. Eventually, Scarlett posted a third message, a longer, more detailed apology that finally named me as the artist and acknowledged that her mother had commissioned the portrait as a graduation gift. She thanked me for my beautiful work and artistic vision, and promised to be more thoughtful about attribution in the future, but by then, the damage was done. The story had taken on a life of its own, becoming a cautionary tale about social media narcissism, the invisibility of women's work, and the importance of giving credit where credit is due. Scarlett's name became associated with the controversy, something that would follow her as she began her graduate studies at Oxford. I felt bad about that, honestly. I hadn't wanted to ruin anyone's life or career prospects. I had simply wanted to be acknowledged for my work, to be seen as the professional artist I am rather than dismissed as an anonymous admirer. The experience taught me several important lessons about the value of my own work and the importance of standing up for professional recognition. It also led to an unexpected surge in commissions from people who had discovered my art through the controversy, many of whom specifically mentioned that they wanted to support an artist who advocated for proper attribution, but perhaps most importantly, it reminded me why I became an artist in the first place: to create something meaningful, to capture the essence of human experience in paint and canvas, to contribute something beautiful and lasting to the world. That purpose doesn't change regardless of whether my work is properly credited or casually dismissed. 6 months later, I'm still painting portraits, still working to capture the souls of my subjects in brushstrokes and color. I have better contracts now, clearer agreements about attribution and credit. I've learned to advocate for myself more effectively, to insist on being seen and acknowledged for my professional contributions, and somewhere in England, Scarlett Nakamura is pursuing her graduate studies, hopefully having learned something about the importance of recognizing the work and humanity of the people who contribute to our lives in ways both large and small. The portrait itself? It's hanging in Madison's living room, where it continues to capture a moment of joy and possibility frozen in time. Regardless of everything that happened afterward, it remains some of my best work, a testament to the power of art to reveal truth, even when that truth is more complicated than anyone expected. Some stories don't have neat endings. Some betrayals lead to reckoning. And sometimes, the most painful experiences teach us the most important lessons about our own worth and the value of speaking our truth, even when it's uncomfortable. I painted her graduation portrait. She called me some fan. But I'm not anyone's fan. I'm Evelyn Rosewood, professional artist, and I deserve to be seen.
Do you enjoy stories with emotion and twists? Then like, subscribe, and activate the bell. Here, every word touches you.